This is one of those. Today's guest needs no introduction. Iconic television producer, longtime associated with David Letterman, currently a real estate mogul in Southern California, Robert Morton. Welcome to Deeper Dives. Let's get started. We are here today on Deeper Dives with iconic television producer and real estate icon, Robert Morton. Morty! How are you today?
Quite a build-up, thank you. Hardly iconic, I'm just a journeyman, that's all.
Our show really talks about brands and building brands, and you've helped build so many brands across the board on television, and wanted to talk to you just a little bit more about where you started and how you got to that point.
Well, it's interesting because I've always been, that's kind of been a focus of mine, building brands in television. And the first opportunity I had to do that was in 1976. I was hired by Warner Communications to do this new project called Cube, which was the first experiment in interactive television. And they did it in Columbus, Ohio. And the whole concept was, you know, they wired the entire town of Columbus as a test market, and they wanted to do local programming. And it was before people had PCs, before people knew anything about you know, any kind of intrusion, any kind of camera, any kind of anything in their home. And they asked us to hire a show to kind of test the system to see if the hardware and the software worked. And we did a show called How Do You Like Your Eggs? It was a game show. And it was just a simple polling show. And how do you like your eggs was a question on the show.
Now, in a moment, you're going to participate in a brand new game show that we call How Do You Like Your Eggs? But first, let me tell you a little bit more about our two-way television system. Now, this is your home console. I'll hold it here so you can get a look at it again. Every time you press one of these 5 buttons, the computer will count your response.
And technically, everything worked. The ideas and the programming that came out of it were very successful, and I'll talk about those, but the Cube system did not succeed. But out of it, Warner got, MTV was born out of that, and Nickelodeon was born out of that.
Oh, wow.
So they got 2 of their most profitable franchises just from that Cube project.
But the fact that that was in the 70s and how innovative that was, just testing it out, and like you said, they didn't necessarily survive, but what came out of it is legendary.
Yeah, and for me, you know, it was just great to work on a startup. So then after that, I went to work for MTV, and I was one of the original members of the MTV brand. There were maybe 5 or 6 people who were the founders. And
so I guess you worked with one of my old bosses, Bob Pittman.
I did. He's a good guy.
Great guy.
Always liked working with him. He brought me in, basically, myself and an old friend of mine named Sue Steinberg. Sue and I were hired, basically, everybody was from the music business, and there was nobody on the early staff that had any television experience. So they hired us basically to be the TV people to get it on air. And, you know, we hired all the VJs, we hired all the directors, all the producers, all the post-production people. We hired everybody, and it was a lot of fun because we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know how to explain it to people. You know, here was this new thing, videos, music videos, and we had to explain to people, here's what it's going to be. There were short clips of musicians doing their thing, blah, blah, blah. And people go, really? And you're going to do a whole channel of that? And, you know, we explained it, and, you know, we hired the original 5 VJs.
So when you first started there, did you think, was the general thought you were changing the world, or was it just, what a great gig for a young guy?
It was the greatest gig ever. And I honestly, I was such a jerk because I did not believe that I was changing the world. We were changing the world. I wasn't certainly alone. I thought, okay, you know, this fun little cable project, it'll probably fail. I remember when they came up with the name MTV, and I was like, what? A network with one letter? How could you have that? After I worked at Cube and before I worked at MTV, I had worked on two local shows in Boston and in New York. And then I worked on a show called The Tomorrow Show, which was really the first late night show. It was on after The Tonight Show, and Tom Snyder, who was a great broadcaster and a great guy, he was the host of the show. But that was experimental TV. We were giving, we were booking guests that we were able to give an hour of television to, rather than a 3, 4, 5 minute interview that you'd get on a morning show or on the Tonight Show or whatever else there was. It was an exciting place to be. But I got fired from that job, and I say it proudly because the guy that fired me turned out to be one of the biggest assholes of all time, Roger Ailes. But he was the kind of guy that we'd come up to him and say, he was producer of the show, and we'd say, hey, let's get so-and-so as a guest. Cary Grant would be a great guest to have on the show. And Ailes responded on many, many occasions by saying, oh yeah, I got something on him, he'll do it. Wow. That was really his attitude.
So I think it said, don't judge me by my friends, but judge me by my enemies. Well done, Morty.
Yeah, exactly.
Well done.
Oh, I wore that as a bad, a former hippie. I love the fact that I took on Roger Ailes. He ultimately fired me, and it was a good thing. Then in 1982, when Letterman started the late night show, and then I was at Good Morning America, Letterman called me and said, I want you to work on the show. He goes, I can't offer you the producer job, but I could offer you the number 2 job. And I said, that's fine. Get me out of here. And I was with Letterman for 14 years.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you were with Letterman during the great late night war, and who was going to succeed Carson, correct?
Yes.
So from your point of view, and for the purpose of our program, which is about brands, that's an interesting brand battle, because you think of Leno and what he represented, and you think of Letterman and what he represented, and those are very disparate brands. So how did you see that brand battle playing out from your point of view?
I don't think we ever considered the Leno brand. It was more the Tonight Show brand and Johnny Carson's brand. And, our biggest fear was, look, we wanted the Tonight Show badly, but then again, it was also a great burden to be able to go in and over Johnny's brand and create it in our molds. It was always the Johnny Carson show, and Letterman was always the David Letterman show. Nobody ever called it, I'm going to watch a late night. I'm going to watch the Letterman show. I'm going to watch the Leno show. I'm going to watch the Carson show. So, going into the Tonight Show was not the ideal situation. But then again, as a career move, it would have been the logical thing for us to do. In hindsight, it was great that we went to CBS. We created our own brand. We created our own theater. And, both of them live on today. So we did something really great.
You literally did a launch. I mean, you were taking an existing brand in Letterman, but you're bringing it into a network that wasn't successful ever in late night.
All of a sudden, CBS, hey, we're in the late night business. We could be wacky and we could write these crazy promos. And, night after night, we were saying, nope, that's not the comedy of this show. No, that's not the way we do things.